Oh, I forgot to run the promo. All right, we're live. Hey, this is Sean, and this is Federal Prison Talk. This is Wings for Life on their YouTube channel and Facebook. And this is Jessica, who works at a domestic violence shelter. She also is an intern over here at Wings for Life. And is this all about prison? It could be. It doesn't have to be. But I know the domestic violence charges could give you a lot of time in prison. We could start there. But Jessica, you want to tell everybody who you are, what you do, and why you bothered coming on here today? No.
Yes. So I am a case management supervisor here. We're actually the third largest domestic violence shelter in the country. And so some of the things that I do is I help my case management team to identify different needs that people have when they're leaving a domestic violence situation, and then helping them connect with all of those things. So definitely, I think that the number one reason why women are usually homeless is from fleeing domestic violence. So it correlates a lot with homelessness. But also too, I know that speaking with your previous director, the first time when I was going to do the internship with Wings, we had discussed, the prevalence of domestic violence with people once they get out of prison, that, relationships tend to be, if the person doesn't have the right communication skills, things like that, they're not taking advantage of those programs. It definitely seems to kind of fall into that sort of relationship later on.
So I said they can become toxic if they weren't already before you went to prison?
Definitely. I think that, I know that with my personal situation, my husband was in prison and he came out, but he had went through the RDAP program and everything like that. And I think it helped him a lot with being able to communicate more effectively. But I know a lot of people that, had similar situations to mine and my husband's, and they ended up not making it in their relationship because, people going into prison, it's like a different set of rules. And then I think when you come out and you're trying to have a family and you're trying to, just be integrated in general, it's not something that's going to come naturally. And especially if you've spent a lot of time in prison, because you got used to one set of rules and it does not translate coming back. So
a lot of people, male and female in prison, try to run their family from that payphone or that phone in the jail. I've seen in the jails people just yelling and screaming and giving orders to their to their woman or their man,
yeah.
and these people are listening to them. And the guy's locked up. I mean, he can't hurt you now, but I guess there's a fear he's going to get out. And I know you've told me. I was hoping we could educate people today, because I know that there are some men who it's vice versa, but I didn't know the numbers were as large as you guys were telling me. That there's more men that are victims than I would have thought. Is that true? You guys were saying that when I had the tour.
Yes. So it's definitely, I think that it's not that it doesn't exist. It's that based on my experience, men don't report it as much. And obviously there's going to be a stigma in the community, especially I think if there's a male and the person that is abusing them is a female, they're going to be less likely to report it. And that stems from a lot of different things, I'd
be afraid to get laughed at. Nobody would believe me. I'm making it up. Right.
And so, and sometimes it is kind of hard to tell if you're in a toxic relationship. Both sides might be contributing in some way or another, and it's horrible. But typically, when you're talking to somebody about domestic violence, people are always going to assume it's usually the male that's the problem, and it's the female. And I even when I first started at this job, I went to a training. And they had talked about how if a woman uses violence in a relationship, then it's different if a man uses violence because, just because of all this, historical trauma, things like that. And
they had the 31 pronouns, or is it 38 now?
I absolutely don't believe in that. I believe that, if we hold everybody accountable to learning, and unlearning toxic things. The number one thing that most people have in common that either end up in abusive relationships or end up being abusive in relationships are people who grew up with that in their childhood.
Yeah, that's me. I grew up, but it was pretty much physical and mental. I mean, my father was the abuser, but it's all the words, the hate words, and you're going to be nothing, and you are nothing, and you're worthless. We hear that every single day. Because the wound, I mean, the bruises will heal. I'd take that any day. The other stuff, it don't heal, man. It stays with you for sometimes it never goes away. I've had 10 years of therapy thanks to the federal government when they set me on pretrial in prison, but most people don't get that, and it's been a big help. But I know that I'm thinking most domestic violence cases are not physical. Am I right?
You would be correct. I think that unfortunately people will wait until it gets to that point. And I hear from people all the time that, they're looking to get out of a relationship. They don't even think about the fact that they might be in an abusive relationship, and their first thought is, well, no one's hit me yet. And to be quite honest, that's more on like the end, the in the further progression.
Yeah, stage 5 or something, right?
Yeah, because I mean, before somebody hits you, especially like if you're in an abusive relationship, so abuse in itself is about power and control. So for a person to feel comfortable enough that they have as much power and control over you, there's some groundwork that has to be put in.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
most people like say, "Why didn't you see the red flags in the beginning?" But like, so
right.
tell us, why didn't they see the flags?
Yes. So, and yes, you're absolutely right. In retrospect, I think a lot of people are like, oh, why didn't I see that? But, red flags people don't think about, if somebody's trying to move really fast in a relationship, I want to point out if somebody's been in prison for a really long time, they're probably going to want to move fast in a relationship. They're out of practice, whatever. It just kind of happens. So it's a little difficult to see that. But like, somebody, if you barely know the person, you guys have just been kind of talking, and then like they're like immediately like, hey, let's move in together. Hey, I really, I really love you. I want to have kids with you. I'd love to get married, things like that. It's real easy because just media in general makes it sound like, oh, that's what everybody wants, that like whirlwind romance, you get swept off your feet. But that's definitely something that can be a red flag. And, a red flag, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in an abusive relationship. It is just that, a red flag. It's something that you need to take note of and proceed with caution.
So what kind of signs can people look for? Is it something like they don't like your friends? They start telling you how to dress and talk? What are some of the signs?
Yes. Yeah. So, the moving too fast, definitely trying to isolate you from your friends by saying like, oh, I don't like that person, or like your family. And depending on how skilled this person is at manipulation, it might not even look that way. So I know that.
Do you think they know they're manipulating you, or is that just their natural personal? Because you said how much experience they have, like they've done this before, right? I guess.
Right. So I think if I don't want to make it sound like every person that's abusive in a relationship is, just completely conscious of everything they're doing, because like I said, it's a learned behavior. So they grew up seeing this and they didn't recognize it as abuse. So I think that it's more of like a habit, like, okay, if we're in a relationship, then you're mine and you're supposed to follow what I say. And by choosing not to do that, you're choosing that, like, they might feel like this is how I'm testing this person's loyalty to me. But if you feel like you have to make someone break their own personal boundaries to prove their loyalty to you, that is toxic and that is abusive. And so that's definitely something I think, like you were saying, if they're trying to control what you're wearing, if this is something the person wore when you met, if this is, what I mean, like, it's not fair for you to expect them to change everything. And if something like that was going to happen, it needs to happen on its own, like that the person just feels like, hey, I don't want to, you can voice that something makes you feel uncomfortable, but not giving ultimatums or, making accusations. another one of the biggest issues is people that are very, very possessive and jealous. Now this is the number one thing
And
that I
that's
hear
you
on.
hear that a lot. Who's on that phone? Who are you texting? Who's calling you? And all
Yes.
that, right?
Yes. So if you're getting that like straight out the gate, I know me, like I grew up in a household of, nothing but toxicity. I have, my grandmother, my great grandmother, my mom, I heard stories of them, being beaten up and everything like that. Like I come from a long line of single women who had horrible stories. So I think um if you kind of bring that into the relationship, it can kind of make those things happen. Because I remember thinking like, oh, somebody doesn't love me unless they're jealous over me or something. Like if I was in a
Oh, I
healthy
can see that.
relationship,
Yeah.
yeah, if I was in a healthy relationship, I kind of like was like, well, why don't they care? And so it can be so just as much as somebody who's abusive can be trained into doing that in a certain sense, somebody who's being abused is also groomed to be abused. So that's one of those things people don't think about.
Yeah, well, like with my kid, I've heard children turn out two ways, just like the abuser or the complete opposite. I'd like to hope I'm the complete opposite. Um, you know, um, I've never ever hit any woman, but then the verbal stuff, I gotta watch that.
Yeah.
That's the worst. I remember though my dad would beat me and he'd say, "I'm only doing this because I love you." Then I started being a smartass. I go, "Well, I'd hate to be here on a day like that. You hate me. What's that like, right?" Oh, then I'd get it worse, right?
Yeah.
But I said it because I had to say it, and I kept I'd say it almost on purpose to get beat twice as much because it's like I don't know. So there was the movie Goodwill Hunting. You ever see that one?
Yeah.
So there's a part where Robin Williams asks him Will about his father. You're talking about their fathers both beating him, and he says, "Well, mine told me a belt, a baseball bat, or a metal pipe. Which one you chose?" I chose the metal pipe because fuck him. My language, but just and I get that. I get that. If you're gonna hurt me, just hurt me then, man. You know,
Mhm.
and maybe that's just you get used to being abused. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then later on, I know a lot of people in prison and stuff start hurting themselves.
Yeah.
There's that because, well, I don't know why it's just part of the. I would say half the people in prison come from broken homes that or domestic violence cases. Probably way more than that, but
Yeah.
a lot more men have been abused when they were children than you would think, but they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, but women are always, how should I say, when the domestic violence shelters, I always thought only women were allowed in there, but
I
I'm
think a lot of people think that.
yeah. So, and not this isn't to be a show about men or women, but how many men are coming forward now? Because there are those jealous women that are go crazy on a guy's phone, and I've had it happen to me. And who are you talking to? And my challenge is, if you're in a new relationship, here's my phone. You take and let me have your phone. I tried that one once, and she said, "You're going to take my phone. Well, what if I get a call? I'll answer it." Right? And but she wouldn't do it. But wanted to know who's on my phone all the time. So
Yeah. And that definitely sounds like, that the groundwork was being laid for that. I'll definitely tell you that with a lot of the experience that I had with a lot of our residents that come in that are males, they usually grew up in a home watching, their father being very abusive with their mother. And like you said, like, sometimes people, they want to go the exact opposite, and they do the exact opposite. So they feel in some way that it's okay for a woman to abuse them, like they're making up for what they grew
oh,
up with or
there's
something.
that too.
They're trying to
Yeah,
balance
yeah.
it out. Um,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I've done a lot of work with a lot of our male residents, and like, helping to identify, with the feeling guilty, like they and it is difficult, I think, to learn how to set boundaries and be healthy, um, in a way that's not aggressive. If that's all you've ever seen, some people, are out here in the world thinking that relationships, no matter what, they're abusive, and you're just choosing um, whether you're going to be the person abused or the person abusing. Like I've heard that attitude a lot. And honestly, that's something that's why it's so important that you're doing that work on yourself. You got to figure out like um, what are your expectations of a relationship, and then talking with somebody who's like outside of your circle in a certain sense,
Yeah.
somebody that has a more healthy view of relationships, that can help you identify those. Because I mean, a lot of times, like even myself, I've been working here for over 5 years. I still will find things that about me that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's toxic. Oh my goodness, like you know, um,
Yeah. You know,
recognizing that. So
um,
just because
yeah,
someone's been abused before doesn't mean that they can't be the abuser later. And
yeah.
that's
I always wonder
really
if there's an abuser.
happens.
Is there an abuser, and all of us just laying, off to the side, ready to? We got some comments here though. It says this is kill 'em all with karma. It says I know the mental abuse is just as bad as physical abuse. A lot of people
Yes.
are know that nowadays. I mean, I guess we've come that far, right? Actions,
Yeah.
not distractions. What's up, everybody? I see if there's any more comments here. Hey, actions, and they're talking. No, what's up, Karma and Earl? Hey, all right, huh?
Yes. So, yeah, I definitely think, people, I think the problem with the mental abuse is that it took people so long to recognize that. For the longest time, abuse wasn't even considered abuse until somebody was getting hit. And even then, it had to be, oh, was there marks? Was there proof? For mental abuse, we're finally starting to educate people on that. We're starting to like help people recognize, like, hey, these are signs of mental abuse. Um, the whole thing about gaslighting, love bombing, all of that stuff. That mental abuse is really where most of it is at. Until somebody has convinced you that they are irreplaceable in your life, or that, for some reason you deserve whatever they're going to put you through, it's not going to work. And
Well,
so that's where
if they hit you, it's your fault because you brought up that time that that they were in high school, and I told you every time you bring it up, I'm going to act like that. So it's your fault, right?
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Nothing's ever their fault.
no.
Everything's always your fault. Regardless of if it's a male or female, sometimes they might even bring up, "Hey, you knew I grew up in this sort of situation, and you know that's going to trigger me, and it's going to make me happen, make that
And
happen."
I can't stand that TV show, but here you have it on, right?
You know?
Right?
So yeah,
Or-
and so like things like that. Honestly, I think that it's so subtle in the beginning that you could almost justify it. That's the thing that's difficult, because I've heard people where um the the person, like they were very very close with their mom, but them and their mom were always arguing about the relationship or whatever decisions the person was making.
So in
And
their
so,
mind, that's close. That means close to them.
well, they were close, but then they started to argue. I mean, any relationship you're close, you're gonna like have disagreements and stuff. But the relationship they were in and the person they were with, they were like, you know what? I don't think you should talk to your mom anymore. Like I can tell this person's really upsetting you, and and it's just I feel like they're taking more from you than you have to give, and everything like that. And so in the beginning, it seemed like, oh, you know what, this person genuinely cares about me, and maybe there's something like that. And that was just the first step, because that was the person that they were really close to and that they reached out to. So like waging a war on somebody immediately in a more subtle way, it's like understanding that those things, it does not always look like abuse at first. And depending on how experienced a person is at isolating someone, it can look like a genuine, like, oh, they care. So it's just one of those things you always have to be aware, that even with the best of intentions, like it can turn toxic. And so it's really
I do.
important that you don't
All right, I
allow
see you. I'm
yourself to
talking
be
to you.
isolated. The more and more you feel like that relationship overshadows everything else in life, the more and more likely that you are in a toxic relationship. Quite frankly, you have
I
to
know
have.
I'm kind of I'm almost 60, but I know there was a time when men didn't want their wives to go to work. They would stay home and housewives because I don't think that way they couldn't escape or make it on their own. So they almost kind of kept them in that world. And now women are out there with careers and running companies and everything else. And those kind of men are I don't know what happened to them. I guess they still find their victims, but does that still go on today?
Yes, it does. It does actually. And that's part of the, I think, with the culture, especially, here in our state, we have that real machismo type of culture. So it's like, the man takes care of or he's supposed to be taking care of the woman. She trusts him to do it, that sort of thing. It's still deeply ingrained in there. So a lot of people don't see that as a red flag at all. And sometimes it's not. Like I said, all of these red flags, it does not necessarily mean someone is being abusive. And it could just be a simple thing like, hey, I grew up with, I take care of the bills and everything. You don't worry about it. You take care of the house, whatever. And sometimes that does turn out okay. But the difference is like, say, if the other person in the relationship was like, you know what, that's cool, but I want to have my own thing and I want to do my own thing. And then the person starts to fight with them on that. Okay, this person, if you've both explained your sides, you've both established your boundaries and said, this is what I need to be healthy, to be my best self, and that person ignores what you're saying, that is abusive. And that's
I'm sorry, did you say something? I wasn't paying attention. No, just kidding.
So it's just kind of, I think it's very, very subtle when it becomes abusive. And that's the important thing. You have to learn, like, there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to create boundaries, and understanding that people that need power and control, whether they're doing it consciously or subconsciously, they can recognize if you cannot set boundaries, and they prey on that because that is what they need to do what they need to do. And maybe them having power and control in the relationship, whatever sort of thing is going on in their mind, they don't feel like they can have a relationship any other way. That's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. You have to learn how to balance that. And it has to be, an equal amount of give and take. So I see, like, there's people that come out of prison, they've been, out of the game or whatever you want to say. And sometimes they are the ones that get taken advantage of because they've been lonely for so long and they want the relationship to work. And, certain things in prison, like there's like more of like a, hard and fast, like respect, aggressiveness kind of to it, that they don't recognize it either. The more subtle ones, they're not going to see it. And it's like, oh, this is what I got to put up with to be in a relationship, whatever, and it's still not okay.
I got two things I want to ask you about. So somebody who's in the domestic, it's like, let's say it's in stage 4 or whatever. They've been married 3 years or together. Is there any hope to go back, and can they both recover from that if they had therapy? And then the other one is, so when people start a new relationship, what's the healthiest way to start it so you can see the signs? And can you go backwards? Can they get into the abusive relationship, but then can they both get help and come back to be a healthy couple? Is there possible? Is there can you return once you cross the line?
So I think that those are both fair questions. As far as like being able to turn it back, absolutely. I think that there are programs out there called batterer intervention programs. And there's still like a little bit of work that needs to be done, just like anything else, like with like
couples therapy and that. And I took anger management, I took parenting classes, all that in prison, but they always say take a time out. Well, the women I've dated, I take a time out. That's not good. That makes things worse. I can't walk away. That's what they tell you to do in anger management. So
So and to be honest, both people in the relationship, I believe that they have to be doing if they want to work on the relationship, they have to be doing the same program together, because like you said, so some people, they might be triggered, they might have abandonment issues or something like that. And if you try to walk away, it's going to escalate the whole thing, because they don't understand what you're doing. And to them, you're just walking away. So it's, that's why it's so important. It takes so much communication. For anybody who has a history, for anybody who's damaged, like I don't think people understand just how much effort it takes to overcome toxic behaviors that you've always known. It's a lot of communication, and it's a lot of
I understand to have a happy marriage, it's a lot of work and a lot of communication.
Yeah, yeah, and like you, so one of the things people fail to understand is that if you're in an abusive relationship or whatever it is, a lot of it is, you have older stuff deep down inside you. So like maybe you saw something growing up, and so you have this need, like you have to be in control of everything, because when you were younger you weren't in control of anything, and you felt helpless all the time.
Oh,
And
okay.
so this is your safe space. And if you can recognize that, and then you can communicate that to the person that you're with, and then you have to understand that the person that you're with, they're also going to have their own baggage, and
Yeah.
they're going to have things that go in, and it's going to be different for everybody. Maybe you walking away from a situation, for one person they're going to be super grateful because they're like, oh man, I wish that somebody could have just done that, like I just want to be alone. And another person, it's gonna just like take it up a notch.
You walk out, you keep walking. This is right.
Yeah, and so it's like, for things like that, that's why it's so important. You're not just working on your triggers and your insecurities. The moment you step into a relationship, you're taking on their triggers and their insecurities. And that's why it is a lot of work, because you have to understand yourself and each other on that way, because there's going to be times where things are going to get escalated, things are going to get heated. And if you haven't figured out and recognized your own warning signs that you're going to escalate something, then you're not going to be able to be successful in a relationship. And that's where, couples counseling, things like that, I think like having individual counseling is good too. But I think if you're trying to work on a relationship, you need to be in a counseling together as well. So that way you have somebody to mediate, like, hey, what happened in this argument? What was this
And
person's
it's so
side?
it's
What was that person's
possible.
side?
So it's possible. Let's say you have the abuser, and then you have the abusee. It's possible for the abuser to actually work on himself and change and become like a good person.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I will tell you right now, if that person absolutely is ready to take accountability and they are ready to actually work on those things, yes, that is what it's going to take. But my personal opinion is, I think that they would need time apart to do that at first, because it's if you're so used to controlling this person's so used to you controlling them, even when you're trying not to do it, it's going to happen. So
Oh
you have to
yeah.
spend some
Yeah.
time apart, break apart. And that's where you're going to kind of like I said, you have to recognize your own triggers. You have to see your own warning signs. And then you have to teach this person that you're in a relationship about those triggers and those warning signs, and explain to them. And yes, I mean, you have to be very vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, you're giving up power and control. And if that's your safe place, is power and control, then you're going to have to be by yourself for a while, because you have to learn how to give that up and know that you're going to be okay before
But
you
going
bring
to prison
patience.
might be a good thing.
it wasn't my case. So um
Yeah,
but
you take all the classes that they offer in prison. Most of them have all the anger management, parenting, all kinds of ways. Hell, they had one where I was at called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People on the Inside. You probably heard that book that they
mhm,
recommended. Or
that's awesome.
the guy, Mr. Covey, actually wrote one for inmates, and they had a whole course, and I took it like in cycles, and you got credits for it too. But it was a really good course. So that kind of stuff helps. Like how to listen.
Yeah. Yes. No, it's so crazy how it seems like little things, but honestly, those little things really do add up. And it's something, it takes a lot of work. Consistency is huge. It's not impossible to overcome, but it's going to be difficult. Absolutely difficult, especially in a relationship that was already established in a toxic way. It's going to take a long time to recover from that for both people.
And then I wanted to get into the children. I met two like adorable children over there the other last week, and I think they had no hope that things could ever get better. And I think we left there giving them maybe a different view on life. But the children, talk about
Yeah.
the children. What I mean,
So I definitely think one of the things that it's really unfortunate is that our culture, when it comes to domestic violence, we don't talk too much about the children. We don't, or like, even if we do, we're like, oh, that's too
They're not
bad.
old enough. They don't understand. They're
But
watching. They're watching. Yeah.
yeah, they're watching it. And then I think a lot of people think like, oh, if we break off that relationship and it's over and they're not seeing it every day, then we've done everything we can do. And that's really not it. The children are learning all of this stuff. They're they also have their own way of processing it. So what we see a lot of times is that, parents will come into shelter and, for the first time in a long time, the children are recognizing, okay, we're somewhere different. We're not seeing fighting. We're not getting yelled at constantly all the time, but we're so used to that. We don't know how to.
Yeah, they don't know what peaceful is. Quiet
So
is.
they start bringing that into the mix, and they will get more rowdy. They get a little bit more violent and everything like that, just because they're trying to regulate themselves. And so parents, the biggest thing I want to say is, like, no matter how long it takes you to get out of that relationship, like, don't ever think that you've permanently damaged your kids and that they can't ever recover, they can't ever learn. That is not the case, honestly. If you get out of that relationship, and you're talking to your kids, you're very, very upfront and honest, and like, as you're learning, triggers, as you're learning, unhealthy things, you teach your kids, like, these are the things you recognize, this is what you do. That knowledge really is power. That's a power, that's a healthy power, and utilizing that power is where you can gain that control, and so
I think you should talk to your kids and tell them everything. What daddy did was wrong, what mommy did was wrong. Like I told you when my father, he beat me and say, I'm only doing this because I love you. And I say, well, I hate to see what if you hated me, but at least I realized that, because I could have grown up thinking, if somebody doesn't hit me, then they don't love me, right? But I was smart enough to catch on that But some people don't see that. They have to, and women, they feel, I've met women and we get clients all the time. If he's not hitting her, he doesn't love her.
Yeah.
That's because that's what her father did to her. So, and then she finds that guy who will hit her, and she thinks that's love. And if he went and got help and therapy, oh God, then he wouldn't love me anymore, right? You have that problem.
So, yeah, I think, like, people, like, without it being exactly in those words, yeah, people have that idea, like, oh, if somebody gets angry, somebody gets jealous, it's just because they care. It's just because they're so passionate about it. And that's because somebody a long time ago told them, tried to justify the wrong stuff they were doing. And so, yeah, like it can get addicting to be in toxic relationships, to be in abusive relationships. Your adrenaline is pumping, your cortisol's high, and everything like that. These are natural chemical reactions. And if you're so used to that, it is very, very difficult in the beginning to regulate yourself. If you're so used to being in a fight or flight type of response, then everything feels like a fight, or like it. And if you're not seeing the fight, you're on such high guard because you're like, nope, everything's a fight. Why am I not seeing it? What's going on? And so it's like, and that's part of that process, that healing process after an abusive relationship. A lot of people, they don't give themselves the time they need to heal from that. And so what ends up happening is they end up getting into another relationship, and either it's, they're being abused again by a different person, or they're the ones being abusive because they bring that toxicity from one.
Yeah, I know your picture doesn't work anymore. I've heard women say, like, they go on a date. Now, how was the date? Oh, he was too nice. I can't be with him. They don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like, a lot of people think, like, oh, well, if I'm in a, like a vanilla relationship, it's boring, or whatever it is. And it's not like that. They just have to learn how to re-regulate themselves. I think that leaving an abusive relationship is very similar to, like, being in recovery from substances. You got very used to the really high highs and the really low lows. And like learning how to kind of be more like a consistent, steady medium. At first, it seems boring. At first, it's really hard to get used to. And then later you kind of get more used to it, and you're able to function again. And you're like, oh, okay. So like you don't look at that super high as a good thing anymore. You're like, that's unhealthy. Or like, and you're so grateful because it's like, without that super high, you're not worried about that super low either. So it's definitely one of those things. You have to train your mind. You have to you really have to recognize the toxic things that you gained in that relationship. There's no way that you stayed in that relationship without learning some toxic behaviors. And so you have to recognize that before you try to get into any other relationship.
Yeah, I used to say in AA, like if Charles Manson got so clean and sober, you still got Charles Manson to deal with.
Yeah.
And if Charles Manson stopped, he never killed anyone himself, he said, but he manipulated them, right? So if he, right, so there's an example. Still got that person.
Yeah.
Until they, and can the manipulator stop manipulating? Or first they have to have the desire to,
right,
and they have to realize that they do that, admit that. Those are big steps, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, I can't stress enough, if you're in an abusive or toxic relationship and you really want this person to get help, no matter how much you want that person to get help, staying in that relationship isn't going to help them want to get help. Honestly, if they have to lose something to think that there's a problem, and then some people, it doesn't matter to them, and you have to be okay with that, because just some people, they're not going to want to learn a better way. They're not going to want a healthy relationship, and that's okay.
Yeah, they don't do nothing wrong. My family's been around. Just every generation's like this. It's nothing. They just can't handle it. I've heard it all.
Yeah. And so, and you have to be real careful, because a lot of times, like, people that are abusive and manipulative, they'll tell you, oh, I want to change. Oh, I'm going to go to therapy, this and this and that. And they tend to keep you there hoping that it's really going to happen, but they never had any intention of doing it. And so you have to be ready to stand on your word of what you say you're going to do. If this does not change, I am leaving. If this does not change, I'm not giving you my attention. And sometimes
you got to follow through, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I got to go. I know you got to go, but somebody, if they're watching this and they realize they're in a bad relationship, toxic, aggressive, verbal abuse, whatever it is, but they want help and they want out, what can they do? Should they run? Should they pack everything up and leave? Is there a number they can call without the person finding out that they called the number? Because that's a scary thing to do. And I'm going to leave this relationship. Everything I own is in this house. My children are here. I got a job or whatever. I mean, I can't just leave, right? So,
and we're talking about the person, not the abusive person, or the abusive person.
I was talking about the person being abused, but if maybe the other one wants to leave. But anybody who wants help, I mean, is there like 1-800-HELP they can call? Something they look up on Google or phone books, or what do they do? Who can they turn to nowadays? In my day, there was no place for a woman to go that was being battered from her. We just ran from town to town and state to state,
Yes. So there is
to do with us, They didn't want to talk about that. Sweep it under the rug,
Yeah. So there is a national domestic violence hotline. It's 1-800-799-7233.
I could put it on the screen. 1-800
799.
Oh, hold on. It's not. I'll get it in a second. I got too much. There we go. It's not letting me do it for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah, it's not letting me do it. I don't know. But say it again. 1-800.
1-800-799-7233.
Okay.
And what this hotline does is that no matter where you're at, you can talk to them, let them know your situation. It is confidential, and they can give you the phone numbers of shelters that are around you. They'll even
it's working now. I'm sorry. 1-800-799 what now?
7233.
Okay, sorry about that. Now I got it working.
No problem. Yeah.
So they can call it, and is there help in pretty much every city in the country? Do you know? Or
So yes, to a certain extent, yes. I'll let you know that, a lot of states, there's a lot of states, like specifically in the South, that have very, very limited amount of shelters. In New Mexico, we have a shelter in almost every county, which is amazing. But there's, even if it's not a specific shelter, there's usually some sort of like advocacy agency, something like that, that can help connect you to resources.
okay.
But yes, this phone number, it is a 24/7 confidential, um, and you can call wherever you're at. They will connect you directly to a shelter that's around you. We get calls from them all the time. So
Okay. All right. Yeah, I got that up there now. So, any words? Because we do got to wrap it up. But and I know there's a lot of people on here been leaving comments, and I appreciate you guys. And I will definitely share this. I feel like this is a great topic, and a lot of people need to hear this. I, I thought we could do this real fast, but boy, this is a topic you can talk for hours on. So, how about words of advice for people out there? What can they do? I mean, you told them who to call, but words of advice to get through this today, even.
So I would definitely just say, trust your instincts on things. If something doesn't feel right, it doesn't have to make sense. Just follow whatever it is you're thinking something's wrong, and talk to somebody who recognizes healthier things, so that way you can kind of gauge it. And don't cut yourself off of friends or family for any relationship.
Should they tell their friends and family what's been going on to them? Because a lot of them probably keep it secret, right?
I think that is something that the person can judge on their own. Most people, if you have somebody that you can talk to about it, recognizing that most of the time, by the time people leave a relationship, they've mostly burned their bridges. But that's because people don't understand that it is, there's more to it than just the bad stuff, and that it can really be addicting to be in a violent relationship. So if you talk to your friends and family, just know that, people who care about you, they're not going to want to see you get hurt. They're not going to want you to be in a bad situation. It will come with pressure to try to leave, most likely. And it's going to come with a lot of, you might damage that relationship choosing not to leave. So it's more complex than that. And, I think that you would want to talk to somebody who's had experience with that. Would probably be the best thing to do. Try to find a support group or something like that first. So that way, if you have a couple of times that you're trying to leave and you're not sure yet, you're not burning, your bridges with family and friends first. But don't cut yourself off. You stay in contact with them and everything like that. That's the most important thing. Your support network is your strongest asset. And if you don't have a support network, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that you just don't have one yet. So, you can reach out. Some people go to church. You can, join a community center, something like that. You want to make sure that you have other people you can talk to.
Oh, you mean my local drug dealer and all that stuff? That'll solve it for me. I'll just go, I'll take all the fentanyl and heroin and all that.
I do believe I said people that know healthy relationships.
But I say that in fun, but I mean that's how a lot of people are dealing with it, especially here in Albuquerque. I see it all the time. That's
Right.
that's the only way they know how to escape, and it's
Right.
sad, because now they got that for a problem too,
Yeah. So I mean, definitely, I think real life is messy. It's not simple in the sense that like everybody has a therapist or everybody has a church group or something like that. I make sure you have a plan to leave that is safe. You never leave yourself vulnerable in the sense that like you don't have a way to escape. Anybody who, like, if you're in a healthy relationship or whatever, like, you just make sure you have something in case, if you ever wanted to leave that relationship and everything. Like, healthy people recognize boundaries.
Yeah, I
And
think if you are in a relationship where you have to worry about leaving, 'cause you should be free to leave a relationship whatever you want. I mean, you
right,
would think you would sit talk about it and all that, but still, you shouldn't even have to. If you want to leave, you should. So if you're worried that if somebody is in that position where they've got to like plan an escape, I mean, hello, that should tell you that it's not good, right?
yeah. If you feel like you couldn't walk out the door and in that relationship without putting yourself in danger, you're definitely you're definitely in an abusive or toxic relationship. And it's very, very important that just stay smart. Just because you're find yourself in a toxic situation, it doesn't make you um unintelligent. It's none of that. This can literally happen to anybody. But you gotta remind yourself, that you still have to survive in some way. You figure it out. I know it's not simple. I know it might take more than a couple of times. I know you're gonna make mistakes. I see this every day. And my job is to make sure that there's a place you can come to as many times as you need to until you're finally ready to be done for sure, because that's the nature of the beast. That's just what happens. Don't give up.
Is there a way to tell if you're in a bad relationship when you have to ask permission to wear your favorite shoes, or you're in a bad relationship when you can't have any men numbers on your phone. I mean, there's things certain things like that stand out, right? That's obvious,
Yes.
but people may not know that, not realize it. Oh, I
Yes.
don't have men's numbers on my phone because it's out of respect for my husband. But I don't think I don't think that's why,
Right.
right?
Right. Exactly. If you know you're not doing anything wrong, and somebody is so insecure that they're going to make something out of a situation that clearly it isn't, that's more than a red flag. That's straight down abusive. That is abusive and controlling. So you have to make sure. But people, I don't know what it is, but I think that people feel like that's some of the sacrifices that go into having a relationship. You hear all these things. You got to
Yes.
make compromises. You got to make sacrifices. But truth be told, okay, that's not one of the sacrifices. The compromises you make, it has to be like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna get mad at you for leaving your hair on the sink every time you shave, or something like that. Okay, this is a small thing, it's not that big of a deal. But like, oh, all of a sudden we're in a relationship and you can't even trust me with having a phone number of somebody of the opposite sex that I have never given you any reason to think, but other than you just can't handle it. That's not a compromise. That's definitely that's a boundary break. And there's
Yeah.
a difference between compromises and boundary breaks.
Right. Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
somebody's in your life, you're in a relationship, you should feel like having this person in your life, not only did you not have to give up anything that you normally have to be in this relationship, but you should feel like this relationship is enhancing the quality of your life. If you feel like you're giving things up and you're having to change who you are, it's not the relationship for
There,
you.
there you go. If you have to change to please somebody else and they don't like you for who you are, yeah, that's hello McFly. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you shouldn't have to change for any. If they don't like you, they want to change you into something that they want. Well, then go find that because
Yeah.
this is who I am.
Yeah. And you are not meant for everybody. So
Yeah.
if you're in this relationship and it's not working, it's not a failure on your part and it's not a failure on their part. Some people just are not meant to be together, and that's okay. That's not your person. I hope you find your person. Your person is going to really accept you for who you are. I want you to know that, you are capable of being loved and accepted on every level. Um,
Right.
if you are able to give somebody that type of love in an abusive relationship when they're doing all these awful things to you, you deserve to have somebody that's willing to stand by you and love you unconditionally. You have that in you already. You just not in the right relationship, not with the right person.
Well, whoever's watching this show, and if your significant other one knows that you watched this show, you guys might have a talk tonight. I don't know, but I want to thank you. Just I got to wrap it up, and I know you got to get back to work too, right? But we should do this again because this is a good topic. And but you
Absolutely.
every day at work you have this topic, I guess, this discussion, right? With new people coming in. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me on here, Sean. This is really great.
And it's Federal Prison Talk, but it's Wings for Life. And if you guys are out there in Albuquerque area and you got some family problems, no matter what they are, you need housing, jobs, and clothing. It's cold out there. You lost somebody in life, however, just come to us. The numbers it's on the bottom, and we'll help you as best we can. Or we're gonna introduce you to somebody who can. We don't give out some phone number. Try them. We introduce you to other people if we can't do it ourselves because we're trying to get our wings back for life. And Jessica's part of us. So you do good things out there. So keep it up, okay? I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
In office. All right. Bye.
Bye.
And there we go.